Daring, bold, and even senseless at times, Paddy often threw himself into the thick of the fray to save his friends during World War II, capturing entire towns by himself and blowing up airfields from the back of a jeep. With a total disregard for danger, Paddy Mayne's story encompasses everything from punching a commanding officer to being one of the most decorated soldiers in the British Army. In March of 1939, 6 months before Hitler invaded Poland, Paddy joined the Supplementary Reserve in Newtownards, Northern Ireland, and received a commission in the Royal Artillery. He was an ideal recruit, educated at Queen's University, was an amateur heavyweight champion in boxing, and played for the International Irish Rugby team, even selected for the British Lions. But the beginning of World War II cut both his legal and sporting career short. Paddy Mayne received training from the Queen's University Officer Training Corps and was soon transferred to the Royal Ulster Rifles. However, Mayne would soon leave the Royal Ulster Rifles in favor of volunteering for the No. 11 Scottish Commando. Inspired by Winston Churchill's calls for a butcher and bolt reign of terror behind enemy lines, Paddy joined the small raiding force with the intention of going into occupied enemy territory and wreaking havoc on the Germans with small demolitions and night raids. In June of 1941, Paddy's wish would come true. The Battle of the Litani River in Lebanon was his first taste of battle. Accompanying the 21st Australian Brigade, which was advancing along a coastal road to Beirut and needed to cross the Litani River, Paddy and the commando attempted a surprise nighttime landing near the mouth of the river to secure the bridge for the Australians. Unfortunately, rough seas caused the commandos to be delayed, and they weren't able to land until daylight. By this time, Vichy French defenders had destroyed the bridges and were already in a heavy firefight with the Australians. Paddy and the Scottish Commando were forced to act in desperation and threw themselves into the middle of the fight to try to aid the 21st Australian Brigade. The Commando took many casualties that day, including their commander, Lieutenant Colonel R.L. Petter. Paddy Mayne was filled with frustration after the battle and blamed his commanding officer for their failures and left the Commando. One day after a recommendation from an officer, Paddy was invited by Captain David Stirling. As Stirling sat across from Paddy, he began to describe an elite new fighting force known as the Special Air Service. He was faced with the choice of either guerrilla warfare in China, which Paddy had applied to beforehand, or he could join the SAS, parachute into the heart of the German army in the Sahara Desert, and conduct devastating surprise attacks on enemy airfields. Paddy chose the latter, trusting the unorthodox plans of Stirling's. One of Paddy's friends from the No. 11 Commando, Lieutenant Owen McGonigal, had recommended Paddy to Captain Stirling for his leadership displayed at the Battle of the Litani River. Stirling took the recommendation and now turned to Paddy for help against the German Afrika Korps. From November 1941 to the end of 1942, Paddy Mayne terrorized German airfields. Conducting night raids from the back of jeeps, Paddy and his men blew up supplies, ammo storages, airstrips, and enemy aircraft. The German Afrika Korps was soon deprived of communication, fuel, and food and water. Paddy himself was thought to be responsible for the destruction of around 100 aircraft. On the first successful raid of the Special Air Service, Mike Sadler remembers being with Paddy as they navigated through the desert to Tamet, where a very long, deep valley, also called a wadi, led up to a German airfield. From there, Paddy Mayne and his men embarked to the airfield, and in Mayne's own words, bombs were placed on 14 aircraft. 10 aircraft were damaged by having instrument panels destroyed. Bomb and petrol dumps were blown up. Reconnaissance was made down to the seafront, but only empty huts were found. Several telephone poles were blown up. In another account of his actions, Paddy Mayne details how he and David Stirling raided the Sidi Hanish airfield and avoided detection while blowing up 40 German aircraft and only losing 3 jeeps and 2 men. The astounding successes of the SAS kept it from being terminated, as there were many in the British High Command who thought the actions of Paddy and his men were too cavalier. In January of 1943, Stirling was captured and the 1st SAS Regiment was reorganized into the Special Raiding Squadron and the Special Boat Selection. Paddy Mayne, now a major, was chosen to command the Special Raiding Squadron in Sicily and Italy. On July 10, 1943, Paddy would undertake 2 daring operations to capture 4 enemy batteries in preparation for the landing of the British 13th Corps, and additionally capture and hold the town of Augusta on the eastern coast of Sicily. Overall, Paddy was successful in capturing the batteries, along with taking 450 prisoners and killing another 200 to 300 Italians, and personally led his men through machine gun fire to take Augusta. For his actions on this day, he would receive the first of 3 bars to his Distinguished Service Order. In the following year, Mayne was promoted to lieutenant colonel and given leadership of the reformed 1st SAS Regiment. With a blatant disregard for danger, charismatic leadership capabilities, and unmatched determination, Paddy Mayne was a superb and glorified leader to his men. And on April 9, 1945, he would undertake one of the most epic advances in history. While clearing a path for the 4th Canadian Armored Division, Mayne was informed that British soldiers were pinned down by German troops near the town of Oldenburg in northwest Germany. Coming to the rescue, Paddy Mayne jumped into a jeep and raced to where his men were surrounded. With just a sidearm, Paddy exited his vehicle and cleared a nearby house of Germans. From there, he took a Bren light machine gun and drove straight into the advancing Germans who were headed for his friends. Driving up and down, Mayne kept one hand on the wheel and another on his machine gun as he attacked the Germans and stopped to load wounded soldiers onto his jeep. Members of the SAS who weren't wounded were able to clear enemy positions inside houses and take out snipers' nests in this whirlwind of chaos. Following the extraction of his men, Paddy then took those who could fight and headed straight for Oldenburg, where he outflanked the German defenders there and captured the town. Controversially, Mayne was not awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest honor for bravery in the face of the enemy. For his actions on this day, he was instead awarded a 4th Distinguished Service Order. Throughout his career, Paddy Mayne was a beloved leader on the battlefield, but many kept their distance from him during the little downtime they received. With an abusive relationship to alcohol, Paddy often preferred the company of books to people and would routinely challenge, after a period of heavy drinking, any who crossed his path. Increasingly withdrawn, Paddy saw the end of the war in September of 1945 and briefly joined the Falkland Islands Dependency Survey before retiring back to Newtownards with complaints of a crippling back pain. Back in Newtownards, he found work first as a solicitor and then later as a secretary to the Law Society of Northern Ireland. However, his dependence on the bottle worsened as the years rolled by, and on December 13, 1955, he would meet a tragic end. After a long night of continuous drinking, Paddy Mayne left the town of Bangor and made his way home to Newtownards. At roughly 4 a.m., while speeding in his Riley Roadster, he collided with a farmer's vehicle and was found dead at the scene. Hundreds of mourners came to pay their respects to his legacy, and Paddy Mayne is remembered today as a celebrated war hero with a defiant, larger-than-life personality. One of Paddy's officers recalled during his war days that when Paddy had drunk a bottle, he literally picked me up by the lapels of my uniform, clear of the ground, with one hand while punching me with the other, sent me flying. Next day, he didn't remember a thing about it. "Just tell me who did that to you, Gerald," he said. "I told him I walked into a door." He was a very brave man, and I liked him very much. Troubled, wild, and dashing, he was an action movie in real life, and his story is one that continues to inspire people today.